Hi, everybody. This is Steve Sabludowsky, publisher of BayouBuzz.com, and today we're going to be talking about to Jim Brown, and we're going to be talking about the presidential election as well as the U.S. Senate race here in Louisiana, which is getting a little bit controversial after what happened last night over at Dillard University. So, Jim, good afternoon to you.
Steve, good to talk to you and all your listeners, and we're certainly got a lot more people interested in politics as this presidential race is heated up, and it looks like we're finally paying a little attention to the U.S. Senate race, which is extremely important to Louisiana and extremely important to the nation. It's been kind of off the side somewhere, but we're focusing on it now, and I hope it's not too little too late, but it's very, very important. So a good time for all of us to look and analyze and talk about these things.
Absolutely. So let's talk first about and as I do that, let me interrupt myself. I'm posting this on different locations on Facebook. So if I'm looking down, that's the reason why I'm using my phone to do that. So first, let's talk about the U.S. Senate race. What happened last night?
Steve, it was an embarrassment for the candidates, for the state. It was a terrible embarrassment for Dillard University. It was just, there's no winners out of this thing. The people that put the thing on, it was just engulfed in criticism from word go. And if you watch the debate, and the few that did, because I watched the World Series and we went back and watched the debate, but it was just a losing evening. I've been so down on this presidential election. Go to my Facebook page at Jim Brown LA, Jim Brown LA. I post cartoons every day about the odor, the stink of the presidential election. Get this thing over. But I'm starting to look at the U.S. Senate race in the same line. Let's look at it. David Duke was brought into the mix, and he did most of the shouting that evening. There was no crowd control. It was just a disaster for word go. Bringing the former head of the Ku Klux Klan into Dillard University was a tactical mistake. It made for pretty interesting television, quite frankly. We were very entertained by Duke's interruptions. You found out nothing about the U.S. Senate race. But Dillard, on the scale of 1 to 10 on how well it worked out for Dillard, 10 being the best, I'd put him at 1. I read in the paper today the Dillard president, a guy named, I don't know who he is, Walter Kimbrough, and he was criticizing everybody but Dillard. It's the pollsters' fault. It's the TV station's fault. And David Duke shouldn't be involved. Let me tell you what, Dillard did a terrible job of hosting the debate. This guy, Kimbrough, should have had extra security there. They should have anticipated all these things. None of this was any surprise. And I say shame on Dillard for how they handled this entire debate, number one. Duke came in for the guidelines. Like him or not like him, he got his 5%. Well, Dillard says the poll was rigged. The head of Dillard University, the president, says, you sound like Donald Trump. It's a rigged election. Now we got rigged polls by the president of what is supposed to be a respected university. So shame on Dillard, shame on the president of the university, Steve. Then we get into the whole scenario of the fact that no issues were touched on. What are you going to do about health care? I'm against Obamacare. I'm for Obamacare. Fine-tune you. No substance of any kind in the debate. And Steve, Louisiana, of all states, really needs the help of the U.S. congressman. When you look at what my area up in Baton Rouge went through, it's going to take billions of dollars to get these folks back on their feet through no fault of their own, and no flood control, the whole state dealing with what to do about flood insurance, not one word about any issue like that bad. So it was just a wipe-off, and quite frankly, if you didn't waste your time watching it, other than be entertained by all the controversy, then it was a waste of time. Jon Snell, who I respect, should have gotten much tougher. When Duke kept interrupting him, I would have said, Mr. Duke, we've got rules, and you got into this debate under the rules. But if you continue talking, I'm going to have the security guards remove you from this debate. You can't interrupt everybody like that. We don't do things in Louisiana that way. We don't do things in America that way. Snell just kind of let it get out of hand. He's a nice guy, he means well, and maybe he was reluctant to be that tough. I would have urged him, if Duke continues on that way, kick him out of the debate. He can't sit there and argue and dominate the whole debate like he did. So, Steve, we can get into some of the specifics, but it's just very disappointing. Here, so many of us are crying out to see who to vote for. I'm not sure who I'm going to vote for. And yet, we didn't get any sense of it all in the last television debate before the election. And
there's only been two
people watching this who want to understand it and listen to these candidates. They didn't get their shot last night.
Right. And there's only been two TV debates altogether.
What now?
I'm sorry, there's only been two television debates. That's
And
it.
Steve, I remember when Ronald Reagan, when they didn't want to have certain people debate back for the presidential election, and Reagan took the microphone, he put up some of the money for one of the debates. He says, look, everybody's going to eat in this thing. I paid for this debate, or nobody's going to debate. And I know it's a very tough problem. For the folks that don't know this, you've got 24 choices on the ballot. And it's very hard to pick and choose. But these arbitrary decisions, my dollars and every one of your dollars out there paid for this last debate. It was put on by the Louisiana Public Television Network. So your tax dollars and my tax dollars paid for it. And public television just arbitrarily let some outside group, an outside group decide who gets in and who gets out, how much money they got to have to raise. I thought that was irresponsible. Now, if you ask me, hey, Jim, how would you handle it? It's tough. Maybe you have the kiddie table like you did with Bobby Jindal in the presidential election. But you've got people like Rob Maness, who's a colonel, who got, I think, 15% in the senatorial election 2 years ago. You've got former Congressman Cowell, a number of good candidates left out of the debate. And this President Dillard, let me go back and get on this Walter Kimbrough again. I sure hope he's watching this. He says, well, we don't have a chance. He says, people don't have a chance of winning. They're nothing but a distraction. They shouldn't be allowed to debate. Hey, President Kimbrough, this is America. You go back to your university and straighten things out. You've got a lot of straightening out to do down there. And to say that we're going to limit free speech or limit who can participate, I think is highly irresponsible of that guy. I'm way down on Kimbrough. But anyway, Steve, it's got to be a better way to do that for Louisiana. This is too important to us. We arbitrarily pick and choose. Then the system that picks and chooses is criticized. So we've got to get a better way to do this. There are some ways, by the way, Steve. Let me just throw this one out to you if I can. Look at the opportunity we missed. We could have come to Bayou Buzz and what you're doing right here and had all these candidates up here, maybe 5 or 6 at a time, and stream that into every single school and college in this state. Make it mandatory for juniors and seniors approaching the voting age to take a look and watch and see who's going to represent them and make the decisions and say, young people, this is going to affect your life whether you like it or not. And we could have had so many creative ways to communicate the feelings of these candidates, and we just blew it. The state blew it, from the governor on down, public television blew it, and we as a state have got to do a heck of a lot better than that if we're going to inform our voters, and it's so important to do so, and we just missed the chance, Steve.
Okay, actually, what I'm doing right now is I'm looking for the video of the debate. I'm going to see whether or not I'm actually able to play part of it. So let me ask you a couple of questions. Number one, the very beginning, they basically two of the candidates went and started attacking David Duke. And over the issue initially was about health care. Carolyn Fayard had a very short answer on health care and then directly went into her experience during the day talking to some students at a school, and she was asked whether there's a bad guy going to be there, and she said yes, and that's David Duke. So David Duke was attacked, and Duke wanted to respond, and Snell didn't really initially give him an opportunity to respond to the attack, and then to go in and to have the same amount of time to respond to the initial question or the main question, which is Obamacare. So I'm just wondering whether or not that's kind of set it off. I mean, I looking at that, and as you know, I mean, I have no love for David Duke. I'm just wondering whether or not possibly that's what set it off.
Well, I think you're right, Steve. And if you notice in the presidential elections, the moderators in all the 3 presidential elections, and you go back into the primary, into the Republican primary, if someone attacked one candidate or
right.
Got information about one candidate, that person had the chance to respond, and that didn't happen. Now, in fairness to Jon Snell, there was only 1 hour. You got 6 people in 1 hour, which is way too short a period of time. And I guess he had to feel like he had to get so many questions in, and in 1 hour, the total time for each candidate is probably 6 minutes or so when you consider asking the question. So Snell was caught in the trap or in the crossfire of wanting to move the debate on and getting beyond personalities, but giving Duke a chance to respond. Duke got mad about it, obviously, and interrupted Snell repeatedly. So it didn't work out good for either side. So you're right, though. Under the scenario, if someone is attacked, you ought to be given a 30-second to a minute response to respond, whether you like the candidate or not, whether you're for Republican, Democrat, whatever it was. It's up to those who are running the debate and those in government this year that there's a fair playing field. And as a consequence, you can go back to the first debate, the second debate. You can go back to my tax dollars being spent on the first debate. You can go back to how, and I'll tell you what, a Raycom that was the sponsor of the debate to their stations, I'm told you didn't even see the debate down in New Orleans. They stayed on the World Series. Is what I'm told. That's what was in the paper today.
Exactly.
So people throughout New Orleans didn't even get to see the debate, and there were very few viewers all over the state because of the World Series and some of the other things going on. Again, you could have done it other ways and got many more viewers, but that's how they decided to do it. It's better than nothing, but you're right on line, Steve. Someone's attacked, you got to give them a chance to respond.
Sure. Now, they were able to see the debate, but that's if they were lucky enough to hit the next channel, because it was channel 10, which was C-SPAN. So that's, or unless they, did some research about it before. Otherwise, you're right, they would not have seen it.
Well, and that's unfortunate because, again, this is, you can make a debate about some of these officials being somewhat important. The whole control of the U.S. Senate is at hand, and by all reports, the Senate race is very close all over the country, in states all over the country. We're the only state in America, by the way, that will have a runoff, which we will have, that will take place in December. Every other election will already be decided because of our jungle primary we have down here. And so, and you might be talking about control of the U.S. Senate. And the least emphasis we're going to have is the key person who's going to go up there fighting for flood insurance rates and doing so many things that are just critical to Louisiana, more so than most other states in the country. What we do in the better flow of the river, what we do with health care that is so important to us, the infrastructure. Good gosh, every trucker in America says the worst route to travel of I-10, I-55, whatever is through Louisiana. That's federal dollars. So we're not getting some breaks we should, and the U.S. Senator is critical of doing something like that, Steve, and yet we just have kind of not really done a good job across the board. We in the media didn't do a good job. There's been just a little puff pieces in the paper about this race, and there's got to be a way to bring this into home to where it's much clearer and much sharper and much more important so that voters plug in. And I think there was a small audience last night. As you say, you had to go to C-SPAN in New Orleans. Well, everybody honked their horn and raised their hand if they watch C-SPAN pretty regularly.
Right.
You've got to be a real diehard group to do that. So, and I know the World Series, it was bad luck that the final game of the series took place last night when it was scheduled. That's nobody's fault. So things like that happen.
Right.
But guys, this is so important, and we kind of all blew it.
So what I'm going to try to do very quickly is to share my screen.
Well, I think look, people already have a perception of Duke. It's almost kind of like Donald Trump at this stage, and I don't want to link the two at all, but I mean, there's no middle ground with Trump, and to many people, there's no middle ground with Clinton. But I think people already prejudged David Duke. He wanted to dominate the show and not let anyone else monopolize this whole debate. And again, I don't want to criticize Jon Snell. He's a good guy, good newscaster. I think he was
Terrific.
was saying, what do? Do you kick him off the stage? And in retrospect, Raycom, who sponsored this thing, the television network, says, yeah, if he keeps interrupting and carries on like this, tell him we're going to take you off the stage. You will no longer be part of this debate. And I'd have had that understanding before they all went up on the stage. I want everybody to know right now what the rules are. And if you we've only got an hour. If you play by the rules, we're going to have you in there. But if you don't play by the rules, you're not going to be part of this debate. And that's probably something that Raycom should have insisted on. And no one maybe knew how it was going to come out, Steve. So those are things we learn as you go forward. And I hope that's the approach that is taken when you've got so many candidates the next time we have another debate, which is going to be ways down the line.
Now, here's something I think is really kind of interesting. Steve Hanwork, who is the executive director for the Louisiana Republican Party, is saying that seems like, and I'm not verifying this, but this is what he said on Twitter, seems like Raycom News is so embarrassed that they have blocked C-SPAN from archiving the debate.
Well, that I just saw it came up on the screen, and you just said that, and I hope that's not the case. First of all, Raycom, and would not receive the brunt of the criticism. I think it's, if you want good controversial television, putting David Duke in the mix with these other candidates and the hollering and the screaming, you might get more viewers, quite frankly, coming to it. I don't see the downside for Raycom for letting people go on the line. And if they did do this, and if Steve Hanwork is right, then I think it's just censorship by the press and something that is not healthy. It's their decision, but it's their money and their network. But they have to let this go forward. This is not a reflection on them. Behind the scenes, maybe it is for not setting tougher rules. But it's lively television rather than some of the dull debates we've seen in the past. That's unfortunate. I hope that's not the case. But from what you've got up here, it looks like it is.
So getting to that, let me ask you this question, and that is, if at the time that you're putting this debate together, and I'm assuming that this happened around the time, maybe even after, I don't know the details, maybe you do, qualifying, which was in August. So, what do you do if you find out that David Duke is going to be is running? What do you do? Do you maintain the same standards that you had before? Do you increase the standards by maybe requiring, like another organization did, which was to mandate that you have 5% and $100,000 in campaign contributions by a particular...
$1 million, Steve, is what public television required. $1 million.
Oh, it was $1 million? I thought it was $100,000.
Months into his campaign, and he got all the free publicity. So, but anyway, go ahead.
Okay, so whether it's 100,000 or $1 million, I mean, do you increase it? I wrote today on Bayou Buzz that I thought that what they did is what they had to do. I mean, you can't play favorites. You can't give David Duke more of a platform than he deserves. One, I mean, the thing is that if it's perceived in any way that he is intentionally denied access, I mean, not only will he sue like he did on Channel 4 when he first ran in District 81, but he would, and if you remember, actually, you were up in Baton Rouge, I can tell you that Channel 4 looked really bad in doing that. But secondly, he plays the victim very well. And he makes the argument that the media is against them. And so...
Well, Donald Trump's done that for the last 6 months.
Oh, sure.
And the election's rigged. It's rigged. I got a funny joke up on my website, JimBrownUSA.com, and my Facebook page, too. Right now, my Twitter feed is where Trump is looking over at one of the Cleveland Indians and say, "Tell him it was rigged. Tell him it was rigged." Look, this is a democracy, and everybody should be allowed to have their say. Going back to Dillard University, you have these protesters rioting, trying to break the door in, throwing things, and trying to limit free speech. They wanted to have their opinion, but they didn't want to have somebody else's opinion. Well, in America, the right to freedom of speech is basic, and within some very minor limitations. You can't scream fire in the middle of a movie theater, but outside of something like that, that's just what the price we pay in a democracy. And I think most voters feel that Duke probably shouldn't have been a part of it. He might be good television entertainment, but he's disruptive over the issues that you and I are here talking about. Having said that, that's how the system works. And to arbitrarily say, well, we're going to limit that, or we're going to eliminate because we don't like the person's views, to me is just a very sad commentary in our democratic system. And as a taxpayer, I go back to the Louisiana Public Broadcasting, where they arbitrarily said, well, you got to have $1 million. Well, they didn't say it. They let an outside group make all these decisions with our tax dollars, Steve. I think that was wrong, and that's not, I don't think it's illegal, quite frankly, if someone wanted to challenge it. But in any event, you got the David Dukes of the world, and you got the some wild-eyed activists on the left. We saw that here in Baton Rouge, the police shootings right here coming in from out of state.